DC47 Spider City. Soul-touching and life-enhancing stories. Spider City. Mongai was a traveler from the time he turned 18. He had packed his bags and explained to his parents that he needed to see what was out there in the big world. Even though his parents were sad to see him go, they were not really surprised at his decision. As a young child, his parents had to keep a close eye on Mongai and had to search the neighborhood regularly because he ventured out with any chance he got. They knew their dreamy boy was going to venture away as soon as he got a chance. In the beginning he had missed his parents, but his enthusiasm and wonder for the world took over. Mongai traveled to many places in the world and met many different people. He experienced different lands and different sceneries of big and small cities and their surroundings. He did not want too many things with him. It would only weigh him down, and really, he had thought about it, and he had no need for all those things he had seen people gathered over the years, restricting them in their movements. Those people he met on his travels that invited him to stay for a couple of days sometimes had to actually create space for him. Lugging too much and too many things along would make his travels difficult, and he had no need to settle down. Early one morning, with a slight breeze at his back, he was walking down a beautiful country road leading out of the town he had visited, and he noticed a farmer in the nearby field. As the farmer was the only person he had met that morning, he felt he could make a little stop and have a little chat. And so he walked up and introduced himself. The farmer invited him to sit down for a drink and a bite to eat, and introduced himself as Dondor. "Where are you going, Mongai?" "I am not going anywhere in particular. I am just wandering and letting the road lead me to the next place." "Well, my boy," said Dondor, "the direction you are heading is leading to Spider City." "Really? That sounds fascinating. Are there spiders in that city?" asked Mongai. The farmer hesitated and answered, "In a way, but not as we know them. They are invisible." "That sounds strange," said Mongai. "Yes," said Dondor, "it is a beautiful country, but you have to watch out. For I know many travelers on their life's adventure who got stuck there in that country and that city, and never returned and never continued their way of traveling. I know, because I have been there. So please take my advice if you still want to go. If you have to go, go, but watch out. And when you feel caught one day, and you don't know how to continue your travels or need answers to your questions, go to the Blue Lake at sunrise. Look in the water, and you will get your answers." They shared a small meal and talked about other things. Mongai thought it was a little strange, this old farmer telling him this story, but like any other traveler, he was curious to see and experience Spider City. He walked for several days until he saw in the distance a huge wall which seemingly was surrounding the city. A wall built with silver and gold stones reflecting brightly in the sun. "This must be one of the richest cities I have been to," Mongai was thinking to himself. As he reached the gate, he noticed there were no guards. This must be a safe place, he thought, but still he was cautious as he walked in. Inside the city, he saw beauty and riches all around him, such beauty as he had never seen or experienced before. As he walked further into the city, the streets became more and more busy, and ended up in the center of the city with many stores, a huge marketplace, and lots of activities going on around him. Walking further, exploring the city, he noticed that everybody was dressed extravagantly, but whenever somebody passed him, he felt something he was not familiar with. It was strange, and he couldn't figure out what it was. It was almost as if something invisible was touching his skin. At least, that is what his senses told him. He wiped his face as if something had touched him. Then again, he thought that he saw something out of the corners of his eyes. As he passed the shop, his eyes caught a marvelous sword, and the sword was like a magnetic pulling towards him. His heart was telling him, "This is something you really need, Mongai." And Mongai thought, "I really need that sword. It's really something I need." As he did not have enough money to purchase the sword, he walked on. While he was walking further down the street, he still felt something like pulling in his heart and kept thinking about the sword. And then, all of a sudden, he passed a beautiful woman, and his eyes got bigger and bigger. "Wow," he thought, "everything in this city is beautiful." As he kept following the woman with his eyes, she disappeared in one of the alleys. Then he tried to follow her, but lost her in the crowd. But the vision of her face stayed close to Mongai's thoughts. And again, the strange pulling came over him in sensation from his heart, and at the same time as if something was pulling on his lips. He realized he was hungry, and went into a little restaurant just across the street. The food was so delicious that while he was eating, he wished that he could keep on eating this food forever, because it tasted so wonderful. As he left the restaurant, he again experienced this strange pulling that came now from his stomach. The moment he was thinking of the food, the sword, and the woman, all these different sensations took over. He kept looking back over his shoulder, constantly left and right. He did not know what had come over him or what was following him. He shook his head and shoulders and said to himself, "It is just because everything is new and so beautiful. I haven't seen anything like that. That's why." He started suddenly thinking about his family, and he felt a strange pull as if he needed to go back home again. He sat down in a little park and noticed that all around him were many beautiful flowers, almost inviting him to touch them. After some time he did so, and as he touched them, they were like a magnet and giving him a feeling inside his body. He was trembling and felt full of light as he walked away. He felt as if his fingers were pulling him back to touch them again. That evening, he looked for an inn and went to bed early, and he could not sleep peacefully because he was thinking of all these things he had seen that day. He got a strong feeling that he needed finally to settle down, and this city was the perfect place. "I will find a secure job, and with the money I make, I will build a house." It took him a long time to fall asleep because his mind was still going on, thinking about his father, mother, the sword, the taste of the food, the beautiful woman, the flowers, the sword, and many other things that had caught his eye. Mongai settled down in the city, and for many years he led a life like most other people in that city. He worked, he gathered money and possessions, and his house was now full of items, especially paintings and artwork. Mongai tried to convince himself that he was completely content and happy because he had all the things he wanted, but somewhere inside of him, this longing for traveling was coming up to the surface more than ever, because all these years he had just been busy with working to get what he had today. Although he had made lots of friends, he still felt lonely, and he remembered that he once had been a traveler, and actually, looking back, he had been much more content and at peace in the past than he was today. Then he remembered the farmer, and his words came strongly in his mind. "When you feel the need for answers, go to the blue lake. Be there at sunrise and look into the water. and you will find the answers. The next day, as the sun was rising, Mungai woke up at the blue lake where he had spent a restless night. He looked into the water and saw his reflection, and it looked as if he was hanging, caught in a spider's web. As he started looking more intensely, he saw strings attached to almost every part of his body, going out in every direction. Everywhere he saw strings. Now he understood that everything he had seen and wanted and gathered had created a connection by means of invisible strings to his body. Now he really felt that he was caught in a net of attachments, and especially the attachments he had created while being in the city. Possessions, beauty, attractions, all had tied him down. That is why he could not continue his travels, and he remembered that when he entered the city he had felt at various times these invisible strings, but at that time he did not know where they were. All the people in the city were caught in their own web of wishes, wants, and attachments. He started hitting around himself with his arms and legs, trying to free himself from these spider strings, but when he looked back into the water, they were all still connected to him. Now Mungai became very upset with himself and thought, how can I get out of this situation? Then, in a flash, he saw the face of the farmer, Dandor, and remembered his words. I have been there before. So Mungai came to the realization that Dandor had been in the city, but also had found the way out again. Mungai closed his eyes and spoke on the inside. Dandor, please, help me. And as Mungai looked in the water again, he saw Dandor stepping out of the blue lake. Mungai was really surprised and fell backwards on the ground. Then Dandor greeted Mungai and said, I hope you have understood the trap of Spider City, and that through all your wishes, wants, and attachments, you caught yourself in your own web, from which you cannot get out. Correct, said Mungai. I do not want to be caught any more. I want to be free as I once was when I was traveling. Dandor said, you are an honest man, and I know that traveling is really what your heart desires. And just as I was freed to become a farmer again, I will help you in the same manner as my Savior did for me many years ago. I know that the adventure of life is more important to you than all the objects which are just holding you down. Dandor took out a big golden machete and started cutting all the strings of the spider's web Mungai had created. And each time a string got cut, loud noises like firecrackers were heard, and at the same time sparks of colorful lights were shooting out in all directions. Mungai felt he could breathe again. How can I ever thank you, Dandor? You have saved my life. No need to thank me, said Dandor. Just watch out on your way in the future. You will find even more beautiful cities and countries than this. But how can I protect myself from not getting caught again? Asked Mungai. I have some magical dust. And Dandor handed him a little pouch. The dust in this pouch is ever present as long as you live. Before you go into any city or enter any new country, just sprinkle it onto yourself and it will protect you. And every evening, when you think your mind is creating wishes and wants, you just wash yourself entirely with the dust. Mungai thanked him once more and looked deep into the eyes of his benefactor, this very special farmer, and he continued his life as a traveler to see and explore the world. This time it was even easier as he had the magical dust, preventing him from getting caught into the web of his own wishes. what the story could bring us. Every feeling, thought, wish, fantasy, experience, when connected with the things of the world, are like invisible connections to the things of this world, which we get attached to. And in a way, we are creating our own web and stealing our own freedom away.